Thanks, Asya, and thanks everyone for being here. It's a great pleasure to give this edition of the Colloquium. My topic is greenwashing or post-greenwashing, and I'm going to start with a few definitions. So for me, in this context, poetics is broadly the study not of meaning itself, but of how meaning comes about. So the study of how meaning is produced affectively and aesthetically. So I'm taking some inspiration there from Glasson Bachelard, the Poetics of Space. And corporate environmentalism is a term that has a very broad definition, designed to capture all elements of how companies talk about their involvement with the environment. And with the term corporation, it can even be extended to states and other organisations like NGOs. So the motivation for this, for me, is that I think in the last 5 years we've entered a new phase of despair when it comes to climate politics. Everyone seems to know that we are seemingly trapped. Okay? There's greater and greater determination to act and more failure to act. Okay. So. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Sure. So. Michael Mann had a book on climate doomism recently, and I think that captures the general mood. So my research question for this project, which has occupied me for the last 3 months as a Landhouse Fellow, is why is corporate environmentalism as effective as ever at derailing climate action, despite widespread credulity towards greenwashing? Last year came out an article which was kind of the inspiration for this project as part of my postdoc, in which we targeted Dow Chemical, who I'm sure most of you know, who in partnership with the Olympic Games and also the World Economic Forum have embarked on a campaign attempting to redefine the role of business in society, this so-called stakeholder capitalism which takes over from shareholder capitalism. And we were able to show that although that might contain some good things in reality, in rhetoric, it contains a lot of dividend for Dow and for the club, if you like, of global corporations that are no longer in denial, but are now actually partaking of what I call a confessional mode, admitting perhaps to past mistakes, but thereby positioning themselves as part of future solutions. So, in this project, I started off surveying a range of different companies, and it soon became evident the most interesting place to look at is the big 5 tech companies. For various reasons, they've come to dominate our lives. There wouldn't be anyone here in the room that today has not already partaken of at least 2 or 3 of these companies' products. Every time you look something up on the web, presumably Amazon Web Services is hosting that material. This decade is going to be another crucial decade in climate change, okay? And this decade is also going to be the crucial decade in AI. So it shocked me a little while ago, about a month ago, when the World Meteorological Organization said there is about a 1% chance that 2 degrees will be breached this decade. Can you believe that? Big tech are lining up, almost in parallel it seems, to apologise for the fact they might not meet their 2030 targets because of investment in AI data centres. So this investment apparently is something that we are to celebrate, because AI, of course, will accelerate climate technologies, despite the short-term boost, the short-term enormous drawer in power that it uses. So the essence of this project is that greenwashing itself is not a very good term to take on these big companies. We need something more, for several reasons. And I thank Angela Antle here for pointing me towards this particular paper. This is kind of a standard bearer paper in how academics treat greenwashing, which is normally something treated more at a journalistic and activist level. Okay. Now this paper came out a couple of years ago, and it's recently had a review, and the review basically said that it basically checked out, but there's a lot of problems with it. So what it's attempting to do is give us 28 criteria. And if we answer yes to any of those criteria regarding a corporate claim, then we've got greenwashing, okay? So if we just have a look, this is just one page of about 10 pages of highly detailed information. I think there's something going on there that might be called the mythos of logos. We fail to see the forest for the trees. In the review of this framework, where they got about 8 experts to actually actively assess companies, all of them said the framework was kind of useful but unwieldy, very difficult to navigate, and the spreadsheet itself was something akin to a disaster. So I think the problem there is that every definition refers to a claim, a corporate claim, okay? So that's problematic, I think, because we're entering this post or meta greenwashing era where it becomes about the identity of the company, and it becomes about trust, and it becomes about companies trying to reiterate what climate change is and what it means and what we and they can do about it. And so individual claims about whether a certain paint product has an ecological lifespan of however many years, this to me seems to be blinding ourselves to the real issue. So what I put under the heading of Greenwashing 2.0 is 2 things: attendance to subject positions and attendance to meta-narratives. So by subject positions, I mean roles that may be official or semi-official or informal, positions from which to speak and act. I take this from Michel Foucault, also Louis Althusser. And these roles are subject to limited negotiation, and we can to some extent negotiate the roles that we are interpolated into, but in other extents, no. And meta-narratives. Yes, the era of meta-narratives is back, I think. And the big meta-narrative is the Anthropocene. Looked at differently, the big meta-narrative is climate crisis or climate emergency. So in corporate storytelling, companies are actively entering the field and trying to redefine climate change on their own terms. And they're doing it in such a way that is, if you like, poetic. And we need tools taken from literary critical analysis to be able to grasp it. I've been developing these tools, and there's a heavy theoretical component to this that I'm not including in this lecture. So today, I'm really just going to show about 3 examples and do a kind of a trial analysis, and then hopefully get your feedback on whether you think this is a positive development to notions of greenwashing. All right, so I think we'll watch this one in its entirety, if you'll bear with me.
This is The Journey. Our route to a more sustainable future for people and the planet. Because this is climate change, the defining issue of our generation. No one can solve it alone. We will only succeed together. It's why we're placing sustainability at the center of our work. And with each emerging technology and every new opportunity, we ask, how can we advance sustainability? So far on our journey, this is what we've learned. That the world's not on track. That to meet global targets, more action is needed, and urgently. But still, there's hope. Because we have advanced, we are making progress, and we need to keep going. We've identified new opportunities, new technologies, and unlocked new breakthroughs. The world's come together, and with purpose. And so this is the journey. A path of innovation, of partnerships, of new solutions, of transparency and shared learnings for our business, for our customers, and for the world. These are the people, the creative ones, courageous ones, resilient ones. Because progress takes all of us, colleagues, partners, suppliers, and customers, infusing sustainability into every part of our business. This is the journey, and more people are joining us on it. Our impact is growing through skilling, investment, and collective action. Step by step, mile after mile, this is the journey we're taking, our path to advancing sustainability. Join us as we continue this journey together.
Okay, so that's Microsoft. So in terms of subject positioning and corporate storytelling, eco-narratives, what's going on there? Well, I would argue that there are three different logics at play that are being fused together in this narrative. The first one is the notion of sustainability. Every time you utter the word sustainability, you cannot dissociate it from its opposite. That's the only place it gets its meaning, okay? So we've got here a logic of the binary, logic of binary opposites. We've also got, in classic techno-solutionist terms, a logic of problem solution, a logic of technical rationality. Okay? This is obviously where Microsoft is on very confident ground. But what this video adds is this logic of the journey. And we don't want to read too many kind of biblical references into this. But journey is a term that has been taken up in popular culture with this very worthy sense. You're on a personal journey. It denotes this quasi-theological struggle. What journey does in relation to these two other logics, though, is bind them together such that sustainability, that we're all worried about, can now be seen in teleological terms as the natural progression from problem to solution in this journey. That, interestingly, if you look at that, Microsoft is not itself saying that, come with us, we have the solutions. It's saying we're creating a movement that is bigger than us. We just happen to be, if you like, the facilitator of that movement. And I would say that's one of the key recruiting tools they've got. By recruiting, I mean for consumers, for staff, for investors, all sorts of stakeholders. Because what we really lack today is the sense that we are working collectively on this problem. So that's the product that's being sold there, and you can get on board through Microsoft. We have to realise that Microsoft's, we're not going to gain anything by saying Microsoft is evil. At least around about half of what they're doing is a good thing, right? Okay? But it's just that the way that the project is justifying itself, it starts to lay these foundations and start to redefine the nature of climate change and put it firmly within the solvable technical rationality of big tech. So Journey is this epic kind of purpose-driven universal. It's Microsoft talking in this universal mode, which subject positioning as a technique can allow you to understand, and a productive slippage between the universal and what happens to be Microsoft's view of the world. So Journey contains this moral element, and we basically end up with sustainability as a modern day fable. In terms of the subject positions, the we and the us join us. The creative ones, the solution-focused ones, who are these ones? There's productive ambiguity in there all the time that happens to work for Microsoft. So if you like, the dream of all eco-activists is being constructed for us, this universal subject of climate action. It's just being constructed by Microsoft. So to get into, for me, why this is important is that companies are today exploiting the fact that they, like individuals, have souls. By souls, I don't mean something that survives in the afterlife. I mean some essence of depth, some ineffable depth that must be respected. And if a company can craft its soul such that you see that it has your interests or your values or climate action in its DNA, then it's already won half the battle. And I think that's what they're trying to do. So a little bit of theoretical background here, but not too much, into brands and souls. Public relations was birthed in that period between like the boom of the 1890s and the crash of the 1920s, when kind of monopoly capitalism had free rein, unfortunately companies got away with so much then that public relations was required. A really good book, Creating the Corporate Soul, tells us that businessmen, and it was men, were extremely reluctant to engage in public relations. They saw business as the serious side of society. And communication, of course, was gendered. Okay? And so they were very reluctant to do it unless they had to. At some point, they were convinced. And so almost like a feminization of the corporate soul started to be a very useful way to fend off critiques and attacks from unions and the populist muckraking press at the time. So this softer kind of hand. And from that, piled on top of that, Charles Taylor, and as we know, the 1960s counterculture was really about your truth, like the truth is your truth, okay? And your mission in life is to find that truth and to live that truth. And so there's no better company that emblematizes kind of taking that notion of the soul, the creative, romantic individual, growing into this like fully self-actualized version of itself, than Apple. Apple is very much the corporate emblematization of the counterculture, even though of course it's completely co-opted as one of the world's top 3 or top 5 biggest companies. So corporate soul is brand today. Now we'll watch a little bit of aforementioned company. Apple has quite a series of videos featuring big stars that are, I don't know what quite the genre is called, but they're more like mini films than advertisements. They're the kind of advertisement that comes up on YouTube and people don't press skip. Okay? And this one features Octavia Spencer, who some of you may know.
Welcome to Apple, welcome to Apple. Hi, I'm Tim.
She should be here any minute.
How is the weather coming in? Hi, I'm Tim.
Yeah, I'm gonna do the office's already carbon neutral thing, right?
Yeah, all yours.
I hope we didn't keep you waiting.
Mother Nature.
Mother Nature, welcome to Apple. How is the weather getting in?
The weather was however I wanted it to be. Let's cut to the chase. In 2020, you promised to bring Apple's entire carbon footprint to 0 by 2030. Henry David Thoreau over here said we have a profound opportunity to build a more sustainable future for the planet we share.
I think our 10 o'clock said the same thing.
They all do. All right. This is my 3rd corporate responsibility gig today, so who wants to disappoint me first?
Well, we've got some updates we're excited to share with you.
Materials, status.
Is there a materials person here?
Yes, we are in the process of eliminating all plastic from our packaging by the end.
Let me guess. 50 years from now when someone else is left holding the bag?
By the end of next year, actually.
When we're also currently using 100% recycled aluminum in the enclosures of all our MacBooks, Apple TVs, Apple Watch.
What about iPod Shuffle? It's a joke. Don't you people make Ted Lasso?
Oh, that's a different group.
We're also phasing out leather in our iPhone cases.
What about Brando over there? They phasing you out too?
Oh.
What's next?
Electricity.
Electricity, status.
We're operating on 100% clean electricity.
What runs on 100% clean electricity?
Every Apple office, store, and data center runs on clean electricity, thanks to you and your powerful wind and sun.
And Apple offices are already carbon neutral.
This building is carbon neutral?
Oh yeah, we do it with a mix of clean energy and eliminating green.
What's going on there? If we look at that from subject positioning and a confessional angle, it literally is a very stern, severe, uncompromising Mother Nature holding Apple to account. And you can see, as the video starts, this is a company that is apparently, this is a meeting that is very relatable. This is a meeting that in which the CEO, Tim Cook, is nervous beforehand. Vice President of Sustainability, Lisa Jackson, who used to run the EPA under Obama. Okay, so they are, if you like, in one era, companies might have presented themselves as God-fearing, okay? Today it might be Mother Nature-fearing, okay? So they are trying to very much confess, well, they're trying to show that they're authentic, okay? This is the confessional mode. They're trying to show that they are doing their earnest best. They're vulnerable, authentic, imperfect, but at least they're honest, okay? So this isn't something that Greenwashing 1.0 can capture. This is about building character, building soul, if you like. And so it's not so much about the claim versus claim, but it's about, do you trust this company? Do they represent you? Okay. And in some ways, Apple might be the emblem of like a confessional, like post-60s age of authenticity company, but so are its customers. Okay. This is precisely how it markets to them, by flattering them about their individual creative genius. And what better way in the age of authenticity for a company like Apple to sell its products than to present itself as like the complete opposite of Microsoft's bureaucratic alienation. Okay, so the third example is Amazon, and we're not going through all the big five today, but Amazon's take on all this is leadership. You know about the Climate Pledge, which in 2019 Jeff Bezos started. This is the idea that companies sign up to this pledge to meet the Paris targets 10 years early, by 2040. There's a stadium in Seattle called the Climate Pledge Arena, and Bezos has put in, I think, 10 billion to this Climate Pledge. Okay, so again, it's something that's doing, some really, really good stuff. Okay, but that probably should be what invites us to go and have a look at what else it's doing. And so on Amazon's sustainability YouTube channel, by far the number one video is one 15-second slot. It's been seen 4.6 million times. From the point of view of eco-narration or green storying, see if you can detect what's going on here in this very quick 15 seconds. Okay, so what's actually going on? We'll just watch it briefly one more time. Okay, so Amazon there is parading all these actions as equivalent to equaling climate action. Okay, so we might see it as Amazon leading businesses and leading people towards these worthy goals. Okay, but what they're actually doing is redefining what those goals are. What is climate action? It's a quintessential empty signifier. Okay, we know precisely which direction it's going in, but what it precisely means, same with sustainability, is completely up for grabs. Okay, there's a blue version if you want, there's a deep green version if you want, and this is probably much more the blue version. Okay, so retroactively, by parading all those actions which are very corporate friendly under the tag of climate action, this leadership turns out to be leading the definitional battle, not the climate battle itself. These kind of things, very corporate friendly. They don't say anything about the role of the state, for instance, and that epic soundtrack. Climate action in capital friendly terms. It's time businesses make tackling climate change their business, I think is a good line, because it puts the role of the protagonist on that of the on business, okay? And we start framing climate change in business terms, when surely climate change is at least as much a social issue a social justice issue and a moral issue. So here's another one from Amazon.
What can businesses do to help fight the climate crisis?
I've got a few ideas.
Ich hätte so einige Ideen.
Alcune idee ce le ho.
Use wind or solar, or both. Go all electric faster. I dare you.
¿Por qué no siembras más árboles en vez de cortarlos?
部屋でできるなら地元でも育てられる. Do more sustainable farming. It's a thing now. Proteggi agua.
Mi state facendo preoccupare per i miei nipoti. E neanche ho figli.
I'm only 6. You figure it out.
What's it gonna take for you to do something? Yeah.
What are you waiting for?
Climate change affects all of us. Where am I gonna live if you mess up the planet? This is your chance to do something good.
So in some respects, very much the same thing. These earnest young people are making requests for things that are well within the remit of big companies to do and don't challenge the general capitalist framework in which they operate. So in terms of meta-narrative, business has accepted the challenge. This is according to Amazon. So business is on the right side of history. You can't, in this problem-solution logic, if you're part of the problem, you can't be part of the solution. If you're part of the solution, you can't be part of the problem. So as soon as they define themselves as part of the solution, okay, then it's a big kind of protective barrier against activist critique. But the more interesting thing here is in the subject positions, and it's staged as young people versus big business. It does take on some of those aesthetics of Fridays for the Future, very earnest and frankly angry young people. If you look at the expressions in their faces, they are all deeply concerned and very angry. But what we need to do when we're doing poetics, if you like, is always look for the negative. What wasn't there? How could it have been presented but wasn't? Where was the state? There are only 2 actors here. Fair enough, nice to give young people, you know, a role on the stage. Big business on the stage, inevitably. But where is the state in this? Okay, so re-narrating climate change as a negotiation between the next generation and the current power elite. There's a really good paper on, from a couple of Australians, in fact, on how companies are parading themselves as not only more powerful than the state, but indispensable to climate change. The very same companies, in a way, like Dow Chemical, that have been responsible for part of it, and BP and other big fossil fuel companies. Now they're too big to not be part of the solution. So the way I tend to look at this is that, like with advertising, consumer advertising, whether they're selling like a soap powder, okay, or whatever it is, the meta message is that the path to the good life involves consumption. Okay? Similarly, with this kind of re-narration of the climate story, every company is kind of almost participating in this tithing, almost like donating some funds to the broader corporate sectoral effort to protect their sector from government regulation by redefining themselves as fully aware, fully confessional, fully authentic. Yes, we've seen some problems. We know that it's a crisis. No longer in denial. But we have these programs and plans, and utilising our core expertise, like Google, utilising our core expertise with data so we can give people early warnings to evacuate when floods are coming, etc., rather than dealing with the climate crisis itself. So companies are positioning themselves to be an indispensable part of the solution, and the dividend that they get from that is that their position in the social order, their very dominant position, goes unchallenged and is probably even strengthened. And we've seen that with the big tech companies lining up behind Donald Trump, and companies across the board dropping their 2030 targets, dropping things like at the same time as they're dropping DEI policies, this kind of thing. So I think it's a very scary road that we're going down. So briefly, just to recap, we've seen Microsoft kind of binding this religious logic of this teleology of journey to sustainability and the problem-solution logic. We've seen Apple as positioning itself as the good corporate citizen, earnestly, respectfully dealing with a very angry, rightfully angry Mother Nature. Okay, this is a trial that big corporations need to have for their own sake so that they can be seen to not be shirking the issue. And then almost this pledge of allegiance in which Amazon's climate pledge is not a pledge to reach your Paris targets 10 years early, but it's a pledge to proselytise a brand of environmentalism that doesn't challenge the status quo. So if there's some kind of framework that might sum up what I'm trying to do with this notion of greenwashing 2.0 or post-greenwashing, which hasn't quite got a proper name yet, is that we have greenwashing as a company misrepresenting its practices as more environmental than critics allege. In the middle, identity greenwashing, a company seeks to position its identity as eco-aligned without making any specific claims. This is equivalent to kind of like brand advertising rather than product advertising. And then the full kind of deal in which the company's not even involved really, but it's weaving a narrative about the relation between society, technology and environment, and capitalism has to be part of the subtext there, without making specific claims or without even telling its story, but rather casting this net as the journey, if you like, involving characters that happen to be scripted and selected by these big companies themselves. Thanks very much, everyone.